Off the coast of Hispaniola sits a small island that was once the most dangerous place on earth. No laws, no king, no mercy. For nearly a century, Tortuga was home to thousands of pirates, outlaws, and runaway slaves who built an entire civilization on theft, rum, and blood. This is the real story of Tortuga. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. To understand Tortuga, you have to understand what the Caribbean looked like before the pirates arrived. It is the early 1600s. Spain controls almost everything. After Columbus sailed west in 1492, the Spanish crown claimed the Caribbean as its personal treasure chest. They built colonies on Hispaniola, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. They enslaved indigenous populations. They shipped gold, silver, tobacco, and sugar back to Europe by the ton. The Caribbean was not an adventure. It was a Spanish factory, and Spain had no intention of sharing it with anyone. But England, France, and the Netherlands were watching Spain get rich, and they wanted a piece of it. The problem was that Spain had forts, warships, and the blessing of the Pope himself, who had divided the New World between Spain and Portugal in 1494. Anyone else who showed up was technically an intruder. In practice, anyone else who showed up was a target. So the French showed up anyway. French hunters and traders began settling the western coast of Hispaniola in the early 1600s. These men were not soldiers or noblemen. They were drifters, escaped servants, and men with nothing left to lose in Europe. They hunted wild cattle and pigs that the Spanish had originally brought to the island and abandoned. They smoked the meat over fires called boucans. In French, a man who uses a boucan is a boucanier. In English, we call them buccaneers. These were the original residents of what would become the pirate world. And they were not, at first, pirates at all. They were just trying to survive. The Spanish noticed them eventually, and the Spanish did what they always did. They sent soldiers. They burned the settlements. They slaughtered the cattle that the buccaneers depended on for food. The French survivors fled across a narrow channel to a small mountainous island just off the northwest coast of Hispaniola. The island was shaped like a turtle. The Spanish called it La Tortuga. The French called it Tortuga. It was about 25 miles long and 5 miles wide. It had one natural harbor, dense jungle covering its peaks, and cliffs on its northern coast that made any naval assault nearly impossible. It was, in almost every way, the perfect hideout. Tortuga had been mostly ignored for over a century. Columbus had passed it. Spanish colonizers had not bothered with it because Hispaniola next door was already producing wealth. But what the Spanish overlooked, the French survivors recognized immediately. The southern coast had a sheltered harbor deep enough for large ships. The jungle provided cover, fresh water, and wild game. The cliffs made it nearly impossible to attack from the sea. And its location, sitting right at the entrance to the Windward Passage, the main shipping lane between the Atlantic and the Caribbean, meant that nearly every Spanish treasure fleet sailed within sight of it. The buccaneers settled in. More outcasts followed. Men who had deserted from European navies, escaped indentured servants, freed and escaped enslaved people, and petty criminals who had exhausted every other option. Tortuga became a collection point for the unwanted people of the Atlantic world. And here is where things start to get genuinely interesting. Because these men, with no government, no military authority, no law, and no one telling them what to do, did not descend into pure chaos. They built something. It was rough and violent, but it was a functioning society. The first governing principle of Tortuga was simple. If you were here, you were one of us. It did not matter where you came from, what language you spoke, or what you had done before you arrived. The island absorbed all comers. French buccaneers lived alongside English sailors, Dutch traders, and men whose origins no one bothered to ask about. A crude economy developed. Meat for ship supplies for weapons, weapons for protection, and behind all of it, always the rum. The Spanish did not ignore Tortuga forever. In 1629, the Spanish launched a major assault. They drove out the French and English buccaneers, executed those they could catch, and occupied the island with a small garrison. For a moment, it seemed like the experiment was over. But the buccaneers came back. They always came back. By 1630, English settlers from St. Kitts had sailed to Tortuga and re-established a settlement. The Spanish attacked again in 1635. Then in 1638, a man named Jean Levasseur, a French Huguenot engineer, arrived with orders to take and hold the island for France. Levasseur changed everything. He was not a pirate, he was a builder. He looked at the rocky promontory above the harbor and he built a fort. Not a small wooden stockade, but a real fort. He cut stone from the cliff itself. He positioned cannons to cover every possible approach from the sea. He called it La Montagne, the mountain, and from its walls he could look down on any ship entering the harbor. Levasseur then made himself governor. He was not appointed by France in any official capacity. He simply announced he was in charge, and the buccaneers decided that a man who had just built them an impenetrable fort probably deserved some authority. He collected taxes on goods passing through the harbor. He maintained order, or at least his version of it. He invited pirates to use the harbor as a base as long as they shared a portion of their plunder with the fort. Under Levasseur, Tortuga became something more than a hiding spot. It became an economy. A pirate economy, but an economy. He lasted 12 years before two of his own lieutenants stabbed him to death over a dispute he refused to resolve. This was very much in keeping with the spirit of Tortuga. After Levasseur, the most important figure in the island's history arrived, a man named Bertrand d'Ogeron. He was a French colonial administrator, but pragmatic in a way most colonial administrators were not. He understood that Tortuga's power did not come from France. It came from the pirates. So instead of trying to suppress them, d'Ogeron worked with them. He formalized the system that Levasseur had started. Pirates and privateers who operated out of Tortuga paid a percentage of their captures to the island's administration. In return, they got a safe harbor, access to supplies, a place to sell their plunder, and the protection of the fort. Under d'Ogeron, Tortuga reached its peak. What was daily life actually like on Tortuga? At its height in the 1660s and 1670s, Tortuga had a population of somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people, small by any measure. But its influence was enormous because every pirate ship moving through the Western Caribbean eventually passed through its harbor. The main settlement sat along the southern shore. There was no town planning. Buildings went up where people decided to put them. Taverns, storehouses, repair yards, and homes mixed together in a way that would have horrified any European urban planner. The streets turned to mud when it rained and baked hard when it did not. The taverns were the center of social life. Rum was everywhere and cheap. A successful pirate returning from a raid might spend an entire fortune in a matter of weeks. This was expected. The culture of Tortuga was explicitly anti-accumulation. You came back from a voyage, you spent what you earned, and then you went out again. And then there were the articles. Before any voyage, the captain and crew of a pirate ship would sign what they called articles. These were contracts. They specified the captain's authority, the share of plunder each crew member would receive, and the compensation that injured pirates would get for specific wounds. Lose your right arm, you receive a certain number of pieces of 8. Lose an eye, a different amount. This was, when you look at it honestly, more egalitarian than almost any other institution operating in the Atlantic world at that time. European merchant sailors had no such contracts. Royal Navy sailors were subject to flogging and execution at the captain's discretion. The pirates of Tortuga had, of their own invention, created a system of democratic contracts. The captain of a pirate ship was elected. If the crew decided the captain was making bad decisions, they could vote to remove him. The quartermaster who distributed the plunder was also elected and answered to the crew, not the captain. This separation of powers was designed specifically to prevent any one person from taking everything. These were not good men by any conventional measure. They robbed, they killed, they terrorized the shipping lanes of the Caribbean. But within their own community, they had built something that the rest of the world would not fully embrace for another 100 years. No history of Tortuga is complete without the men who made it famous. The first is Pierre Le Grand, a Frenchman whose story sounds invented and probably was not. In the late 1640s, Legrand was sailing a small boat with a crew of around 28 men in the waters north of Hispaniola. They had been at sea for weeks. They were running low on food and water. They had found nothing worth attacking. Then they spotted a ship, not a small merchant vessel, a Spanish galleon, part of the treasure fleet returning to Europe. The galleon was enormous compared to Legrand's tiny craft and was crewed by over 300 men. Attacking it was suicide by any rational calculation. Pierre Legrand attacked it anyway. He and his men came alongside the galleon in the dark, bored holes in the bottom of their own boat to ensure there was no retreat, and climbed up the sides of the galleon. They found the captain playing cards in his cabin. They captured the ship. Legrand sailed it back to France, collected his fortune, and by most accounts, never returned to piracy. He had gambled everything on one attack, won, and had the wisdom to walk away. He became a legend in Tortuga, not because he had a long career, but because his one act proved what was possible. Other pirates were less careful with their victories. François Lolonais was a Frenchman who had come to the Caribbean as an indentured servant. His years of servitude left him with a hatred of the Spanish that was extreme even by the standards of the time. He was not content to raid ships. He raided coastal towns. He tortured prisoners. The surgeon Alexandre Exquemelin, who sailed with buccaneers and later wrote an account of their lives, described acts of cruelty by Lolonais that made him one of the most feared men in the Caribbean. He raided Venezuela. He sacked the city of Maracaibo. He brought back enormous plunder. And then, in the late 1660s, his luck ran out. His ship wrecked on the coast of Central America. His crew scattered. According to Exquemelin, Lolonais was captured on the Darien Peninsula and met an end that matched the violence he had spent his life delivering to others. The man who stands above all of them is Henry Morgan. Morgan was Welsh. He came to the Caribbean as a young man, and by the 1660s was affiliated with the buccaneers of Tortuga and the wider Caribbean pirate world. But calling Henry Morgan a pirate misses something important. He operated under letters of marque, documents issued by the English governor of Jamaica authorizing him to attack Spanish ships and settlements. This distinction mattered legally. It did not matter at all in practice. In 1668, Morgan sacked Portobello on the coast of Panama. Portobello was one of the most heavily fortified cities in the Spanish Caribbean, the port where silver from Peru was assembled before being shipped to Spain. Morgan took it anyway. The plunder was enormous. In 1671, Morgan did something no privateer had attempted at scale. He crossed the Isthmus of Panama. He led nearly 1,500 men through swamps, jungle, and Spanish resistance, and attacked Panama City from the landward side, the direction nobody expected. Panama City was among the richest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Morgan burned it. The Spanish were furious. England and Spain were technically at peace when the raid happened. Morgan was arrested, shipped back to England, and put on trial. He was acquitted. Not only acquitted, but given a knighthood and appointed Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. Sir Henry Morgan then spent his final years enforcing the law against the very pirates he had once sailed with. The age had a very dark sense of humor. Step back from the individual pirates and look at what they built together. Tortuga was a counterculture, not a romantic one, but a counterculture nonetheless. The world outside Tortuga in the 1650s and 1660s was one of rigid hierarchy. In England, France, and Spain, your position at birth determined almost everything about your life. The son of a nobleman was a nobleman. The son of a peasant was a peasant. The church told you what to believe. The crown told you what to do. On Tortuga, none of that applied. The elected captains, the articles signed before every voyage, the equal shares distributed by the quartermaster, the open harbor that accepted all comers regardless of origin. These were not accidents. They were the result of men who had been at the bottom of the European social order, deliberately constructing something different. The historian Marcus Rediker, who has written extensively on the culture of piracy, argues that the pirate ships of this era were among the most democratic institutions operating anywhere in the Atlantic world at the time. He is not wrong. There was also a concept among the buccaneers called matelotage. This was a formal partnership between two men, legally recognized within the community, that granted shared property rights, mutual obligations of care, and inheritance rights in case one of them died. The institution was real and was recognized by the community. In a world where rank and birth determined everything, here was a small island where men were choosing their own leaders, writing their own contracts, and creating recognized forms of partnership. It was also brutal and exploitative. The same pirates who voted on their articles were enslaving people they captured. There is no clean version of this history, but the tension within it, between the internal democracy and the external brutality, is part of what makes Tortuga so strange and so worth understanding. Every lawless world eventually attracts a law. The turning point came in 1670 with the Treaty of Madrid, signed between England and Spain. England agreed to stop issuing letters of marque to privateers attacking Spanish ships and settlements. Spain agreed to recognize English possession of Jamaica and other Caribbean territories. The deal was diplomatic. It was also a direct attack on the economic model that Tortuga ran on. Henry Morgan's Panama raid in 1671 was in part a last gasp of the old system. The letters of marque he was operating under were outdated when he launched it. He knew this. He did it anyway. In Jamaica, new governors began enforcing anti-piracy laws with real consequences. Pirate captains who had once been welcome in Port Royal were now being hanged there. The message was clear. The Crown's tolerance was finished. Tortuga itself was brought increasingly under formal French control. The buccaneers who remained began drifting east toward the coast of Hispaniola that would eventually become the French colony of Saint-Domingue. The harbor at Tortuga was still used, but less and less by pirates. The final blow came from economics as much as politics. Spain had stripped much of the easily accessible gold and silver from the Americas. The treasure fleets were smaller and better protected. The easy targets were gone. The risk-reward calculation was changing. Pirates moved. Some went north, operating off the coast of North America. Some went east around the Cape of Good Hope and into the Indian Ocean, where the Mughal Empire's treasure ships offered new opportunities. By 1700, Tortuga was no longer the center of anything. The history of Tortuga after the Golden Age is largely a history of forgetting. The French consolidated the western third of Hispaniola into the colony of Saint-Domingue. It became the most profitable colony in the world, producing coffee, sugar, and cotton through the labor of hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans. The violence did not go away. It was reorganized. In 1791, Saint-Domingue became the site of the only successful slave revolution in history. The Haitian Revolution lasted 13 years and ended with the proclamation of the Republic of Haiti in 1804. The descendants of the enslaved people who had worked the same soil as the buccaneers fought and won their freedom. Tortuga itself became part of Haiti after independence. Today, it is called Île de la Tortue. It has a population of around 25,000 people. It is one of the poorest parts of one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. The fort that Levasseur built is mostly ruins. The harbor that once sheltered hundreds of pirate ships now shelters fishing boats. The stories Tortuga generated, though, have never gone away. Alexandra X. Kemelin's account of the buccaneers, published in 1678 and translated into multiple European languages within a decade, was a massive bestseller. It shaped the European imagination of Caribbean piracy for generations. Daniel Defoe's A General History of the Pirates, published in 1724, gave us most of what we think we know about the great pirates of the early 18th century. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, published in 1883, gave the world Long John Silver and an image of pirates that has dominated fiction ever since. And in the Pirates of the Caribbean films, Tortuga appears as the chaotic rum-soaked port that Jack Sparrow calls home. The film version is a fantasy, but it is not entirely disconnected from the reality. What the films miss is the structure beneath the chaos. The articles, the elected captains, the quartermaster system. The fact that this was not random disorder, but a deliberately constructed alternative to the order these men had fled, because Tortuga was a laboratory. In the 17th century, the question of how to organize human society was genuinely open. The divine right of kings was being challenged in England. The first glimmers of the Enlightenment were appearing in European philosophy. People were beginning to ask whether authority had to come from tradition and birth, or whether it could be constructed by consent. The pirates of Tortuga were not philosophers. They were trying to survive, to profit, and to escape the systems that had failed them. But in the process, they ran an experiment. They created a community based on voluntary contracts, elected leadership, and shared stakes in collective enterprises. The experiment had enormous flaws. It was built on violence toward outsiders. It existed within and often depended on the larger slave economy of the Caribbean. But within those limits, it demonstrated something real. People with no institutional support and no inherited authority could create functional governance. They could write rules and follow them. They could distribute power rather than concentrate it. The Brethren of the Coast were not the founders of democracy, but they were running their experiment in the same era that John Locke was writing about the social contract. And while Locke was theorizing in coffee shops in London, the buccaneers of Tortuga were actually doing it, badly and violently and with enormous human cost, but doing it nonetheless. That is not nothing. The island sits there today, quiet and largely forgotten, holding a story more complicated and more interesting than anything Hollywood has put on screen. A story about what happens when the people the world throws away decide to build something of their own. What they build is not clean. It contains the same cruelties and contradictions that the world they fled contained. But it is theirs. And for about 50 years, on a turtle-shaped rock in the Caribbean, it worked. There is one more thing worth noting before we close the story. The Brethren of the Coast were writing their articles and electing their captains in the 1650s and 1660s. John Locke published his foundational work on government by consent in 1689. The American Declaration of Independence came in 1776. The French Revolution in 1789. None of those events were caused by pirates, but they were all asking the same fundamental question that the men of Tortuga had already answered, badly and violently, and decades earlier. Can people govern themselves? The buccaneers of Tortuga said yes. Tortuga was never just an island. It was a dare. A group of cast-offs looked at the rules of the world and decided to write their own. They elected their captains, split their plunder equally, and built a hidden civilization on rum, gunpowder, and sheer audacity. The empire they raised was violent and brief. But for 50 years, on that small rock in the Caribbean, the unwanted men of the Atlantic world proved that even outlaws can build something worth remembering.